Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost podcast. Today I have the pleasure of hosting Thomas Wilson, and we're going to be discussing something really compelling. And the topic we're going to be talking about today is how to develop creativity among neurodivergent kids. Hi Thomas, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here today.
Awesome, good to have you here. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Definitely. As stated, my name is Thomas Wilson. I am a neurodiversity event specialist slash business owner slash advocate slash writer. The list goes on and on at this point. But my focus is really on using creative spaces along with sensory friendly spaces to develop and empower creativity and real life skills in youth. I do things ranging from Dungeons and Dragons to storytelling events to creativity exercises. It's a long list, and I absolutely love what I do, but it's also very much inspired by my own struggles as a young youth without access to resources like this. And each day I work very hard to make sure that it's not just my voice that is being heard, but everybody within the community is heard.
Wow, awesome. Can you tell us about the whole idea of creativity from your perspective and what you understand by creativity?
Definitely. So I'd have to say creativity in my perspective may be a little bit different than some people. I'm a big believer that each individual has the ability to share their story, use it in the way that they want, but it's meant to be seen as a force of human life, a force of human expression, as well as a way in which we communicate and understand one another and access this thing called life. And for me, creativity is really the idea of community, of the expression of the human soul, but also in the end, a way for us as human beings to live a legacy and to have something that allows us to truly connect with the people around us.
Okay, cool. Now, having set that foundation, can we talk about neurodivergence and neurodiversity and how creativity plays in the mix of all of that?
Definitely. So I think definitely not everyone. Neurodiversity is not a monolith, but I think for a lot of us within the neurodiverse community, it's a way for us to feel less alone. It's a way for us to own a power that a lot of society wants to take away from us, as well as it's a way to communicate needs or desires or even our own passions in ways that aren't traditionally seen as normal communication. And the reason I say normal communication is a lot of the people I work with very much don't often communicate well or they need help communicating. And I'm a big believer that helping people express that through creative options is a great foundation to help people find their voice. We know that voice is used a lot for writing and other arts, but I'm a big believer, especially for the neurodiverse community, when we allow them, individuals within the community, to foster and inspire their ideas through creativity, it helps them to surpass certain limitations and potentially understand the world around us and how the world around us understand us.
Okay. And before we go further, do you want to for the layperson or for the uninformed listener who probably just hearing about neurodiversity for the first time, do you want to tell us a little bit about what it's all about?
Definitely, I can let some knowledge in. So I'm definitely not a diagnosis individual. So I don't have perfect knowledge on all the brain aspects, but in its core, neurodiversity is a way in which someone processes the worlds around them, processes their emotions, their thoughts, and things, and it can include elements from autism, ADHD, mental health needs, and really there's two main things in which there's neurotypical and there's neurodiversity, and there's far more different brain processes outside of that. But essentially, the easiest way to think of it is neurotypical. It's a complex way of thinking depending on how a person's diagnosis and how their brain chemistry is. And then the really, really extra simplistic way to put neurotypical is just someone whose thinking or processing of information is not tied to the same limitations, the same mindset, or even chemistry of the brain that neurodiversity would have. And I'm sure there's people out there who could do a far better job about discussing the medical aspects of things, but that's some of the most simplistic way of putting it.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely appreciate your perspective and your angle to that. Now, coming to the point of creativity, do you think, and if so, why, do you think creativity can be demonstrated by the neurodiverse community? Do you think they are already demonstrating creativity at the peak level? What do you think can be done to encourage more creativity in that community?
So I think that's a great question. I would say one of the flaws I see in a lot of people's understanding of neurodiversity and creativity is there's often a mindset of this is how I want someone with neurodiversity to be creative versus, and that tends to be applied more than how can we help this individual with neurodiversity express themselves the way that they want. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of creative spaces that kind of pigeonhole kids or young adults or teens or even adults into a very narrow way of being critical and being creative. And in that, I think we need to understand and open our mindsets to the idea of allowing creativity in more unique ways. And I don't think there's anything wrong with those programs. They work for a lot of people. But one of the things I find is a lot of people are not taught how to be creative in their own way. They're taught how to be creative in the way that the teacher wants, or the educator wants, or the painter class, whatever's going on. It's taught in that very limited educational system. I would also say part of that is allowing free expression. And I have a lot of experience in this field, so I know how to handle it and I can understand what people want. But I also noticed there's a lot of pigeonholing of behavior when it comes to creativity. People don't always realize that someone with neurodiversity, if they're being energetic and excited and talking, that can actually be kind of difficult for that individual. So understanding the person and allowing them to express the way that they work, I think, is one big way. And then another is honoring the person enough to allow them to be joyful and happy, even talkative, and understanding how we can tie that back into a space that'll be creative, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that when someone has a neurodiverse condition, if I can put it that way, or when someone is neurodiverse, I think it heightens the person's sensitivity and ability to be creative. At least from the few people I've met, I've seen it, even from great people who have accomplished great things. I've noticed that some of them found their creative side even in the midst of the challenge that society brings before the neurodiverse. Do you have anything to say about why that trend is? Is it that somehow the brain compensates for whatever is lacking in other areas with super hyper creativity in one area?
So I definitely think there's some truth to that. I would also say I think a part of it, when it comes to creative success and people within the neurodiverse community becoming so successful, I would attribute part of that probably to the expectations people placed on those in the community. There's a lot of drive within the neurodiverse community to do good things, do good work, to be a success, because so often we're told we're just not going to be. There's a lot of kind of a defiance of that expectation. And I think when you tie into the realm of that mindset with the creative skills and the way that the brain does compensate in a lot of ways, I think there is a really strong desire to go, I have this talent. I'm going to make myself a success. I'm going to become this talent that the world's going to recognize. And I think that drive to prove people wrong very much drives creativity and the passion to become more creative. I know for myself, a big reason why I'm doing the work now is to help those communities defy expectations and realize that just because someone says you can't doesn't mean you always have to listen to that.
Cool. Now let's take it back to where we left off, and that would be in the area of kids. How do you develop creativity among neurodivergent kids? Because I think that's something you've also done actively in your endeavors, and I believe you have a thing or two to say in that regard. That I believe people who have kids that are neurodivergent, or even teachers who have custody of kids that are neurodivergent, may be able to benefit from.
Thank you. So I would say the first thing is one thing that I try to apply in helping to develop youth neurodiversity, creativity, and talent is a very much a strengths-based mindset. So often in education systems or programs, and I'm talking about this through the lens of neurodiversity. I'm sure there's a lot of programs that have benefited from some of what I said. But I think when we apply a strengths-based mindset, and a lot of people may hear that and go, oh, but what do you do if something goes wrong? And I can get into that in a moment. But when we establish the mindset of, instead of jumping automatically about what we don't like about something, or we don't like how an art piece is made, and go from how can we encourage this by acknowledging what is good about the art or the writing, trying to help that youth find that creative aspect within their own story, we can then build from that and really develop a mindset of where we can grow. If they're good at art or good at writing, we can understand a track or a narrative that may help them build that skill within school system at home by giving new opportunities, new games to play, new podcasts to listen to, new coloring books. And then as it goes and propelling that forward, we can even help to encourage the idea of independent learning, independent creation. I am a big believer that talent at a young age can be very difficult for youth to deal with because they don't always know how to honor that talent. So building off of what I've already said, I would say give that youth the opportunity to step back from the project and understand if it's something they really want to do, because within these creative projects, if we push and push and push at a young age, a lot of youth are going to push back and not want to do it. And that's not necessarily bad. And another thing that I would emphasize, other than the things I mentioned, the owning, the positivity, strength-based mindset, I would also create a space that is sensory friendly. And other than just, I touched on this a little bit ago, instead of forcing what we want in youth, helping them to establish their own goals and their own sensory space where they feel like they can be truly creative is another big asset. And that can go into the realm of where and when they want to do the work, how much they want to own of that project, what stories they want to tell, what games they want to play. Because so often when youth feel overwhelmed, it's so difficult to continue the effort on that project. So all of those are very simplistic but very powerful tools that I've mentioned.
Cool. So, what are the challenges that neurodivergent kids face today, and what are the ways that we can creatively help these, divergent kids to overcome these challenges?
So I think a big thing that a lot of neurodiverse, even not just neurodiverse youth, are dealing with right now is a very strong kind of overwhelmed state. It feels like schools are a lot, which they are in a lot of ways. There's so much media that is pessimistic and being aimed at them. There's so much. This hasn't been anything new in a while, but there's so many people within older generations who are complaining and treating them youth like they don't know what they're doing. So two big things are building off of the mindset of a sensory space or a space in which they can own and operate comfortably in. I would say we, as providers, as facilitators, educators, whatever, family members, it's important to provide downtime where that youth can truly reset. Among everything I mentioned, there's just so much pressure on youth to continue and succeed in this world. So I would encourage a space where they can own it, they can decompress, listen to what they need to turn their mind off for a bit, really reset all of who they are for a bit. And then the other thing that I would also say is the practice of empathy. I know it's hard to be in a family or be a provider or facilitator and always be empathetic, but the active practice of empathy based on the other person's needs is a really powerful tool that can help youth overcome quite a bit, especially if they trust you enough to know that that empathy is genuine. And I think empathy is a big one that a lot of youth, including the neurodiverse community, need more of today from people in their lives.
Wow, that's quite profound. So, having said all of these, what do you have to say about people out there who don't even know, who are not part of the solution? They are not contributing to the solution that we are talking about to help neurodivergent individuals, manifest their creativity. What do you have to say to these people? They could be in different sectors and industries. And if you want to, like, give examples of people who are ignorant or who are not empathetic, like you mentioned in your previous response, empathetic to the neurodiverse, what do you think these people can do, and how can these people be brought to the awareness that will cause them to understand that these people can become something, these people can manifest their creativity, these people have ideas that can make the world a better place, they have solutions that people also need. So what do you have to say about that?
I think a big thing for individuals like that, I run across a lot of people with that mindset. I do think part of the mindset around that is the idea that things are changing so rapidly, whether or not these people be in older generations or parents or aunts and uncles or even brothers and sisters or friends. I think there's a lot of pushback on the idea of empathy, the idea of sensory-friendly care. I literally just saw an article talking about a few celebrities who are pushing back against trigger warnings and things like that. I think as a society, just because things are changing, just because the world is getting different, or you're not comfortable with how younger generations or anyone is kind of trying to practice the idea of empathy, I think it's important to note that society is meant to move forward. And I think for a lot of people within younger generations, with their family who are supportive, there's an understanding that the world has not been very caring to one another for a while. And while psychology has been around for a while, a lot of people have not actively applied healthy psychological tendencies or really mindsets that empower youth. I'm seeing a lot of hostility towards younger generations, a lot of hostility taught to younger generations. And I really want to emphasize that just because those things were okay at one point, at least in your mind, doesn't mean they were actually ever okay. I think it was just systems in place allowed and kind of pushed that mentality so that people could continue to be inconsiderate to one another, or they could get away with things that today we're pushing back on. And yes, there's a lot of change. It's scary. But I think one of the foundations of what we can do for people as a society is at least try to listen a little bit more openly, try to see things from more than one lens. Because I think on all sides, there's a lot that's scary, but one of the foundations that can help us all is to practice listening, move past our own opinions of things, and continue to apply empathy and a more considerate, empathic light for all people.
Okay, cool. So now, coming from the point of a parent, what are the challenges that parents, are going through? Parents who are caregivers to neurodivergent kids, and how can these parents actually help these kids to leverage and harness their creativity?
I think a big one, and I see a lot of parents doing this. A big thing is really just embracing that creativity for creativity's sake. There's a big movement. It's still very small within the majority of the world, but the idea of active play, which is the practice of allowing just play, which is part of Dungeons and Dragons and part of a lot of programs, like even like Recess, is so important to the human condition, and it allows us to escape for a little bit. So the main thing that I would say would really be just the idea of allow the fostering of these ideas, allow the creative expression. And like I myself am not a parent, so I can't speak on how incredibly hard it is to be a parent. But the other thing that I would say, other than encourage this creativity freely and genuinely, is this goes out to the parents and the family caretakers and things. It's okay for you to step back and play. It's okay for you to embrace your creativity with your kids, no matter the age. I run into a lot of families where their hardest point is they're hitting a wall because they don't have that time to connect with their family, or they're at an impasse. And I would say it's okay to step back. It's okay to breathe. And the active practice of these ideas is really going to help that. And I think help some pressure be relieved from both sides of the family. And I think the first step to that is, once again, listening and trying something new.
All right, cool. Do you want to tell us your own story and what made you get into this space and become so passionate about your message for the neurodivergent community and all the work you do in that area? What was your story like with the subject, and how did you grow to be the person that you are now?
So I will start with saying, like, every day I try to be a better version of myself, but I spent a lot of time within my early years struggling with mental health diagnosis. Neurodiversity wasn't really a term, I feel like, in the early 90s. At least it wasn't one used regularly. But I spent a lot of my time as a youth feeling powerless, feeling alone, feeling afraid. And I was supposed to have been supported in programs like schools. I had some of my worst experiences in my life in schools. I spent a lot of my time being told either I was a prodigy or I was going to end up expelled from school. That was partly because I was diagnosed at the age of 8 with very significant mental illness. I also had a lot of struggles at home, and a lot of my life has been told, like a lot of people have told me a lot of my life, that I very much was going to be a mistake, or I'm a problem, or I'm just going to fail. And so I spent a lot of my time in and out of programs designed to help me that deemed me too difficult to work with, or deemed me problematic, or something based on my diagnosis. And I spent a lot of my time as a youth not knowing how to communicate my needs because I wasn't being effectively taught by the systems in place. And it wasn't really until I got into high school partially where that started to change somewhat. But I knew that my entire life I wanted to help people. I wanted to do good. I didn't want the people who couldn't share their stories to be left behind. And so as I got older, it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I started working as a reading tutor for organizations. Not long after that, I became an advocate. And I've been doing events and other work for a large chunk of my life, but a lot of it's, well, other than about 13 years now, it's been volunteer work where I worked with individuals, starting with that advocacy, starting with that fight as a youth. And as I got older, going back to my 20s, I really put in the effort to find out where I could find my voice, how I could help my people, and how I could help the world. And about 11 years ago, holy cow, almost at this point, I ended up in my day job where I've been a mentor and an advocate, and a educator, so many other things. And then really, when I was at a point in my life when I was late 2021, the year, I really focused that I wanted to do more storytelling. I wanted to help bridge the gap between COVID and people who needed resources, and all of those experiences, all that pain, all that powerlessness really caused me to go, well, how can I tell stories for the community and make the world a better place? I was fully active in 2022. Since then, it's been an absolute whirlwind of success and projects, and it's all been a testament to the idea that people want this kind of care. They want stories to help people. They want people who do good work. And that's a very quick summary of my life and my work, but I hope it works.
Yeah, that definitely works. Thank you so much for sharing all these wonderful stories and insights. I think with all that was said, it's a good place to draw the curtain today. Thank you. If there was one thing that you want to just leave out there or say to someone who's listening, what would that be before we bring it to a close?
The one thing I would say is don't give up on yourself. If you have a dream, if you have a passion, and people telling you you won't make money from it, you won't do it, every day there are people finding innovative ways to do what they love, do what they want to do. There are so many new opportunities, so many new chances, as long as we put in the effort and the work to do them. I was hoped to do this for years. I never thought I'd be doing it to this level of success. And it's just another testament that your passion can be done in your way, whatever creatively or any other system you want it to be.
Wow. That's so profound. Thank you so much, Thomas. And thank you to our listeners for listening to this episode. I believe you found some value in what we have discussed today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, see you next week. Until then, have a good one. Bye-bye.